Hello, everybody. We're back. History of Fresh Produce live stream, and yeah, no Maddie again. But I think we're switching things up now. We're switching. We're evolving. We're
Should
evolving.
I hope she's watching out there, Maddie.
I
We
hope
miss you.
she's still with us. She's just
She's with us in thought. Yeah, she
yeah,
is.
yeah.
Wow. I do think about her every time we schedule a live stream. She had the best intros by
She
far.
does. She
By
does.
far the best.
She did. But here we are again with another live stream episode for all of you. Before we delve into our topic for today, quick rundown of where we've been and where we're going. So, our recent episodes you will have heard since the last live stream episode, two-part series. First, the history of chili peppers, which walked us through a lot of history of chili peppers, and that was just still scraping just the top end of a lot of it. And then we moved on to a totally different topic, and that was actually the second part of this two-part series just dropped yesterday, which was the Great Tea Heist with Robert Fortune. I really enjoyed that one. That was a fun story.
Agreed.
So we hope all of you will have heard that by now. And what do we have coming up, Patrick? So we got a few episodes on the books here. We got Tulip Mania. We're not going to tell you too much what that's going to be, but you can kind of figure out what that's going to be. In honor of spring, we figured. Actually, this will be our first floral episode. But you know what?
It will be.
Floral is part of our community. You know, I think we.
As crazy as it sounds, I've been trying to get to a floral conference. I just haven't been able to make it work in the schedule. It always falls on another conference. So I'm glad we're doing floral. I'm glad it's being. It should be always intertwined in our industry.
It is. So we're gonna break that out, and then we're gonna do an episode. This is gonna be going way back in time to the Carthaginian Empire and the father of farming. So that's gonna be a interesting new perspective on the Carthaginians, and then history of cherries, also on the books coming up. So that's what you have excited or can be excited to look forward to in the near future. But today, Patrick, we're delving into, which was actually inspired by the last two-part series we just did on tea and the tea heist. And we thought, we should look at the history behind some other popular produce-based drinks. And so you and I identified our top 3 produce drinks each. So a total of 6. And we're going to walk through the brief history of those today. So I think it's going to be very enlightening because honestly, I thought some of these drinks were way older than they were, but they're not.
Well, I want to know what people's drinks are, right? Like,
what's your go-to?
What's your go-to?
I know what yours is.
Ty's go-to is orange juice, but he wants fresh squeezed orange juice all the time. Like, that's one thing I told when I got that Citrus America juicer. Like, they ruined orange juice for me, and they're like, "What do you mean we ruined it for you?" I go, "Cause I can't go buy orange juice anymore from the stores." That's how my son is. He's like, "Hey, can you get me a box of oranges?" I'm like,
"Yeah, you basically did that to me. You ruined it for me. Once you expose me to that, I don't like
It's crazy, right? It's absolutely amazing what freshness can do for you, and you'll find out what my 3 are.
But I'm gonna kick it off, Patrick, with my first one, and I would say this is probably my third choice out of not necessarily something I like to drink, but in terms of my favorite story. So this is my third top. So that my third choice out of my top 3, and this is grape juice. And so it's not really a juice I drink personally that much. Probably the last time I drank it was probably as a kid. But as an interesting story, so this somewhat unassuming beverage was actually born out of a fiery religious political movement that sought to stamp out alcohol altogether. And the protagonist in our brief history here is a Methodist dentist, physician, minister with a bit of a messiah complex. How's that for a profile? And
Not
that
bad.
is, right? I think a pretty complex profile there. And his name is Dr. Thomas Bramwell Welch. And Welch was a man so committed to temperance, so horrified by alcohol that he refused even to touch the wine used in his church communion. So imagine that for a second. You have this elected communion steward, and he won't even hold the bottle. So I don't know how he's really serving that position. Anyway, so who was this guy exactly? So he's born in 1825, and he wasn't just your average 19th century American. No, he was a physician. He was a dentist. He was a Methodist minister. And most importantly for our story here, he was a man of principles, specifically the principle that alcohol was not merely a vice, but a societal poison. Okay, a little extreme maybe. But at the time, we have to put this in perspective, the Methodist Church, like many Protestant groups, was aligning itself with the growing temperance movement, which saw alcohol as the root of society's ills. So domestic abuse, poverty, crime, all of it. They said that that traced back to the bottle. Okay. That's the mindset of this period we're talking about. And for Welch, this was more than just a theory. Okay. So one Sunday evening after communion, a man who had apparently had too much of the sacramental wine turned up at the Welch home drunk and disorderly. So I don't know what this person at the church was doing, but clearly having a little too much. Yeah.
A little too good, as we can tell already.
Partying too much with Christ. And that apparently for Welch was just the last straw. That kicked him over the edge. So Welch sets out to solve a problem that no one else really thought existed, and that was how to make wine without the alcohol, which is technically grape juice. But this wasn't going to be just any grape juice, right? The trouble with grape juice is that it ferments. So if you leave it out enough, you've got wine, which is precisely what Welch was trying to avoid. So now we have a new person that enters this story, and that's Louis Pasteur, or probably Louis because he's French. So Louis Pasteur, and he's a French chemist whose work on germ theory and pasteurization, that's where you get the word pasteurization from, gave Welch the key to what he was trying to solve. So in 1869, Welch presses Concord grapes in his kitchen in Vineland, New Jersey. Patrick, you've been there. That's where some of these packing facilities are in the produce industry. Yeah. So he presses these grapes, he filters the juice, he bottles it, boils the bottle to kill the yeast. So you have no more yeast, no fermentation. And just like that, Dr. Welch's unfermented wine is born. Now, you might think that churches would be like, this is amazing, and that they would leap at the chance to rid themselves of this fermented wine. But no, you'd be mistaken, because the response was actually tepid at best and hostile at worst. Okay. Some clergy called it heresy, theologically unsound, historically unfounded, and quite possibly morally suspect. But why? Why such a extreme reaction? It actually makes sense, because for centuries, literally since the days of the apostles, wine had been used as a standard drink for communion. Whether you're a Catholic, Protestant, Anabaptist, all of them used real wine. And yet, by the end of the 19th century, that is starting to change slowly, but surely enough. And Welch's product caught on with a handful of churches, local churches. And then eventually, again, it slowly spreads out of there. And behind it all was a cultural wave, far bigger than Welch himself. Okay. And that, of course, is prohibition. So you have the temperance movement that's starting to gain traction across America. And alcohol was now seen as the enemy of virtue, right? The scourge of public life. And grape juice, well, it was the perfect symbol of clean, sober living. And yet, even with this momentum, grape juice remains a niche curiosity until a young man with his father's zeal and a flair for marketing stepped up. And that is Charles Welch, which, yes, he is related to Thomas because he is his son. And like his father, like his father, he's also a dentist. So clearly a family with strong opinions on teeth and stronger opinions on grapes. I guess it's just in the DNA. And so in the 1890s, Charles takes the reins of his father's unfermented vision and begins to promote this juice in earnest. And the timing was just impeccable, because in 1893, you have the Chicago World's Fair, which gave Charles this immense stage, right? This is a world stage. So he gets thousands of visitors that are sampling the juice. Wonderful, right? And soon, it wasn't just churches buying it. Welch's was becoming a household name. So by 1896, the family business had outgrown its humble Jersey beginnings and now moves to a proper factory in New York. And a few years after that, Dr. Thomas Welch, the father, passes away in 1903, but not before seeing his drink gain legitimacy. So now it's, it's more prevalent. And then came the big endorsements. All right, this is the next stage. In 1913, Secretary of State William Jennings Bryan, you might remember that name from your high school history classes. He's a staunch prohibitionist, and he hosts a diplomatic dinner for the British ambassador.
Okay.
And instead of wine, which was the traditional beverage served at these sort of state functions, he serves Welch's grape juice. Now that caused a stir, but it made the drink fashionable. And so that same year, the U.S. Navy banned alcohol on its ships. And guess what was served in its place, Patrick?
Grape juice.
Welch's, of course. Yeah. So this once heretical, unfermented wine was now a patriotic beverage. And so by the time Prohibition kicked in nationally in 1920, Welch's was perfectly poised to be the alcohol-free alternative for millions. And then if you fast forward to today, Welch's is everywhere. I mean, we've seen it all, right? Jellies, the jams, juice, of course, and nearly half fresh produce, right? Yeah, that's true. Yep. And so it's a nearly $500 million in revenue a year brand. And they've come full circle. So the company moved its headquarters actually to Concord, Massachusetts, which is named fittingly after the Concord.
And it's not Concord, it's Concord.
Concord, okay.
It's from Boston. Get it right. Boston, Come on. All right. Concord.
And what's even more interesting, they actually still grow cuttings from the original vines. So they say from that original Concord.
Sounds like a road trip.
So that is the quick history of grape juice. Pretty cool.
Wow. I can see why you picked it. I can see why, which is a pretty good pick, I would say.
Yeah. Let's see what you got. What you got?
Well, I picked a staple. You know what I mean? One that all my kids enjoyed growing up, right? Okay. And I can tell you, I've never made fresh apple juice by myself.
Apple juice.
But apple juice would be my pick of the top three, right?
Okay.
So let's start way back, okay? In a far, far away land, or for you fans out there, a far, far away galaxy, in what's now Georgia. Archaeological finds suggest that apple fermentation began here, not necessarily in sleek vineyards or I would say grand feasting halls, but in this basic homes, right, of early farmers who really discovered, as so many great civilizations do, that leaving juice out led to something, let's just say, delightful, right?
Oh, yeah.
It's just, people do that to this day. And that juice turned alcoholic by natural fermentation. Mm-hmm. So it was safer than water, easier to store, and crucially fun. Now, fast forward to 55 BCE, Julius Caesar's legions land on the British Isles and discover that locals drinking a kind of cloudy, tangy cider made from that of crab apples. The Romans immediately take to the liking to it. They didn't just drink it, they spread it. As the empire expanded, so did apple cultivation. And cider consumption too, John. So by the time the Normans arrived in England in the 11th century, they brought with them not only new varieties of apples, but the very word cider, which traces an extraordinary linguistic path from the Akkadian word of the sakura, meaning barely beer, to Hebrew's shakahar, Latin's Caesarea, and the Old French's cidre, right? And finally, just English's cider, okay? And so it began, right? Cider's golden age in the medieval Europe. Grapes were fussy, right? And expensive. Apples were forgiving and fruitful. Monasteries, those cradles of innovation, refined apples, the varieties and pressing techniques. Now, as you'll see in the slide, simple wooden presses crushed apples into a pulp, yielding a cloudy juice. And of course, John, okay, and everybody out there, physicians of the Middle Ages, for whatever reason, viewed water with deep suspicion. Raw fruit was even worse, believed to be unbalanced, right? The humors are the right. Think about it. But cider, fermented, mildly alcoholic, nutritious. That was medicinal. Okay. Think about it. Think about the age they're in and what they needed, right? That was a medicinal purpose.
Yeah, you don't want to touch water.
Yeah, so we need a little alcoholic beverage, a little cider.
I'll do it.
So by the 17th century, cider was so widespread and it became regulated. Rules were set, recipes protected, and add raisins or sugar beets to a batch, and you'd actually risk going to jail or even flogging. This was serious business, man. This is like bootlegging for the apple cider. You see why I picked it,
right? Can you imagine getting jailed for just altering a recipe? Jeez, man, that is.
I swear. Listen, we thought Uncle Si on Duck Dynasty was like was trying to grab what's in his cup, Uncle Si's cup in Duck Dynasty. They get sweet tea, and it's fermented apple cider. That's why. That's why he's always acting that. That's why he's always acting that way. Okay.
Yeah, probably.
Now, let's cross the Atlantic, though, right, to colonial America. When the first Europeans arrived, they quickly found that while grains for beer were hard to grow, apples flourished. Through grafting, splicing branches onto other trees, apple orchards spread rapidly across New England. Okay, John? So with apples came cider. And just like centuries before Europe, this was hard cider. Soft cider or sweet cider was pretty much devoid of alcohol, okay? Hard cider was alcoholic enough to keep harmful bacteria at bay, but mellow enough for daily consumption. Even children drank a diluted version known as applekin. John.
Applekin.
Okay, that you would not listen.
We need to see more applekin. We need to see more applekin.
I don't know if we should be giving our kids applekin. Like,
we got Mott's applekin.
It's like the substitute for Robitussin at this point.
Look, it'll be great for a long flight.
You'll have more kids having raspy voices as they grow up. I'm just saying. Okay, and it wasn't just a drink, though. Okay, what's cool about this? It was also currency. So barrels of cider could be used in a barter, left in wills, and stored for years. Some colonies even required settlers to plant orchards to solidify their land claims. We saw a glimpse of this, actually, in the Salem witch trial episode last year. Remember, John?
Yeah, I do remember. I forget. It was one of the accused women. No, it was somebody. It was somebody that
had a hard time in that chapter.
They said somebody, like one of these women, was a witch flying over their apple orchards. So yeah,
that's not true. How dare them?
Listen, you weren't there.
Listen, I know. That's why they got the Angry Orchard cider now.
See?
It's got a witch over it. So, and cider was so central to early American life that founding figures like Benjamin Franklin and botanist John Bartram, another person we talked about last year, championed its virtues. The American Philosophical Society, co-founded by Franklin, made it their mission to improve the production of vegetable juices, as ciders, wines, and many more. And let's not forget John Taylor, a politician of Virginia who believed that cider could save the nation, both economically and morally. He argued that good cider, would reduce reliance on imported spirits and provide farmers with comfort, livestock feed, and a wholesome family beverage. So what happened next? Why did cider, once the drink of pilgrims and presidents, fall out of flavor, right? Or favor? Beer, for one. German and Eastern European immigrants brought with them a deep-rooted beer culture, and they settled largely in the Midwest, where grains thrived. Beer became the beverage of choice. But the real death blow, prohibition, when the Volstead Act took hold in 1920, American ciders devastated, right? They were devastated. Many apple orchards were razed. The knowledge of cider making passed down from generation vanished almost overnight, John. Now we get to apple juice. While cider faced innovations in food preservation, it gave rise to something new. And in the 19th century, Louis Pasteur, yep, him again, introduced pasteurization, a method of heating and cooling liquids to kill harmful microbes. And guess what? It changed everything. Suddenly, juice would be stored safely with steam-powered hydraulic presses and improved filtration. Juice became clearer, cleaner, and more appealing. American companies like Martinelli's and Mott's seized the opportunity. Apple juice, non-alcoholic, pasteurized, bottled, entered into mass production. And the 20th century brought even more change. Concentrated apple juice allowed juice to be evaporated and then reconstituted with water. Cheaper to ship, easy to store, added to the aseptic packaging, juice in boxes that could still be on shelves for months. Apple juice went global. Okay, everyone. And that's where we are now. Apple juice, once the fermented lifeblood of early civilizations, is now a staple of lunchboxes and breakfast tables around the globe. It's identified as, identity has really shifted from the boozy substance to a health conscious beverage, John. So
yeah, we're seeing some common themes here. Awesome.
Yeah,
we're seeing some common themes here, right? Prohibition is kicking a lot of these formerly alcoholic beverages into non-alcoholic beverages that kids now drink. So we'll see if that theme continues, but something to keep in mind as we move along here. So let's move into my number 2. And my number 2, this one's a really interesting one. I had no idea what this was, but I stumbled across it. I said, we got to tell this story. So this is called Sharbet. At least that's how I believe you pronounce it. So this drink starts in Persia, okay, and sometime before the 12th century. And Sharbet, or Sharbet, I'm going to keep saying that.
Sharbet.
Sharbet comes from the Arabic shariba, which is to drink, and it appears in a Persian medical encyclopedia written in around the 1100s. Now, in classical Arabic, sharab refers to alcoholic beverages, but as Islam spread and as alcohol was prohibited in Muslim societies, sharbet evolved to refer to non-alcoholic sweetened beverages, which is what we're going to be talking about. So back in the 12th century, sharbet was more than just a drink. Okay, it was a concoction. It was a cooling elixir. So imagine for a minute the arid climate of the Iranian plateau, the blazing sun overhead, and in your hand, a chilled blend of rose water, lemon, and just a hint of mint sweetened with honey. This is kind of a drink we're talking about. So this was seen as medicinal. This wasn't just a refreshment. It was health, a soothing drink designed to cool the body and calm the spirit. And again, the ingredients, there's a ton of different versions of this drink, but some of the more common ingredients in the drink, you had rose water, saffron, basil seeds. These ingredients weren't just fragrant and colorful, because they were, but they were also considered therapeutic. And then during the Safavid dynasty, so we're talking early 1500s to the 1700s, sharbet went from remedy to ritual, and it became a staple of Persian court life. The nobles drank it, the royals served it, and guests were welcomed with it as a sign of deep hospitality. And Persian hospitality, of course, is legendary, right? So sharbet was more than just a welcome drink. It was a symbol of refinement, of grace. It was the drink of gardens, of poetry about gardens. And it became deeply embedded in the very notion of Persian identity. Now, as Persian culture began to radiate outward, so too did, of course, its food and culinary style, and with it, the sharbet. And no one spread it further than the Mughals. And the Mughals, we've talked about them over the course of several episodes in the past. These group of people were descendants of Timur and Genghis Khan. These are the kind of people we're talking about. And they brought Persian language, art, architecture, and sharbet into India. And there it took on a life of its own. And India fell in love with sharbet. The climate, for one, made it an instant hit. But more than that, the abundance of tropical fruits and herbs opened up just a rainbow of possibilities. It's like, going to I don't know, like a sub counter and having all the possibilities of all the toppings. This is what we're talking about. So they had coos, rose, sandalwood, bale fruit, lime, tamarind. I mean, the list goes on and on. And even today, India's markets are bursting with jewel-toned bottles of rue afza, which is basically a type
There it
of
is.
sherbet. There it is, right? And they also make these things at home. You can make homemade versions of this. Not to mention the cultural expectations. So if you're hosting guests during the summer, you're not reaching for a Coke in India. You're serving this chilled sherbet, which you're seeing if you're watching live on the screen here. Now, Patrick, while the Mughals were I think that looks really refreshing.
I'd try it.
Yeah, it reminds me of like fruit punch or something.
Pass me a sherbet.
I think so. We'll get down to it at some point.
Almost like it reminds me of like a Shirley Temple. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it does.
Shirley Temple with a lime.
Yeah.
Normally we do it with like cherries, but if like you're in India.
When in India.
Now,
Patrick, while the Mughals were transforming India's palate, all right.
Okay.
There's another thing going on. This is with the Ottomans who are doing something similar in Anatolia. So the Ottomans, like the Indians, adored sherbet. It was often consumed before or with meals, and it became part of the empire's rich culinary tradition. And one example is I'm going to try to pronounce this. It's Turkish, Keresik Composto. And this drink, again, there's many versions of sherbet. So this one is a thick, rose-colored drink made from simmered apple, quince, pear, peach, and apricot. And based on what I was reading, it's essentially a fruit compote in drinkable form, diluted with cold water and served on ice. So interesting. And it became ceremonial as well. So during Ramadan, sherbets were passed around to break the fast, and the attention to presentation, the ornate glasses, the floating flower petals, it was all part of the experience. Now, I want to, this is an interesting connection between sherbet and I would say the Western world, so Europeans and the English language. So in English, the word sherbet, so I went from sherbet to sherbet, entered via Turkish and Persian. Now, originally, it referred to a fruit syrup you'd mix with water. But by the 17th century, Europeans were freezing these concoctions. And eventually, maybe you see where I'm going with this, it evolved into what we now know as sorbet. So that's sorbet is a frozen derivative of this drink. Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh? Now, sorbet aside, we're going to finish up here with our sherbet. So by the time of the Second World War in Britain, sherbet powder, so if you're watching again live, you can see on the screen here, it's that fizzy, sweet powder, usually eaten by dipping a lollipop or licking from your finger.
Okay.
This became very popular, and it was promoted as a substitute for cream-based desserts, which were in short supply. So this old Persian drink, once sipped by sultans and Safavid nobles, became this fizzy kids' treat in wartime England. I know my kids still like that stuff. It's way too sweet for me, but it seems to still be popular today. And so, yeah, today sherbet is experiencing somewhat of a revival. So as the world looks for more of those natural, wellness-oriented drinks, that syrupy floral blends of sherbet are being rediscovered. So you'll find them, probably in trendy cafes, health-conscious mocktails, and of course, still on those Persian tables or those sugar straws. Yeah.
I'll still do one. Listen, I'll take a hit of that every once in a while, man. My kids will get one of those, and I'm like, let me just get a little bit. And bro, you're like,
yeah, exactly.
Like immediately, they get you. You get you every time. But
so sherbet, I now I want to try one of those.
Yeah, sherbet. So, well, let's move to the next one. We'll start off with showing you. With that's right, tomato juice. Which I'm not a fan of tomato juice, but I'm a fan of tomato soup. Which
I was gonna say the same thing. Yeah,
mine is more of a cold versus hot.
Yeah,
like the same thing. Like, check this out. Like, I don't eat macaroni salad because I don't like cold macaroni. right?
Oh, you don't? I see. I like cold macaroni. I don't like tomatoes.
What's wrong with you people?
I don't like tomatoes, but I will eat tomato soup.
No, I will eat tomatoes. I will eat tomatoes on my sandwiches, tomatoes in salads, tomatoes. I love bruschetta, yeah, I will do tomatoes all night long. Okay.
All night long.
All night long.
That's gonna trigger that.
Yeah. What else? Yeah, dude, no, tomatoes on everything, but not tomato juice. I like the creamy texture of tomato juice. I want it to be tomato soup, so it'd have to be warm. I've tried to do like those V8s, man.
No, I don't like those either.
Like, sorry.
So you obviously didn't pick this for the flavor, but for the story.
I picked it for the story.
Okay, all right.
That's what it came down to. I said, this is a unique story, and for those of you who don't like tomato juice like me, it makes you look at it a little bit differently, though, right? So let's begin in French Lick, India. Okay,
French
French Lick.
What?
Okay.
Couldn't they call it French Kiss, India?
No, French Lick, Indiana.
Sorry.
Wow. Famous for its mineral springs, spa, resorts, and of course, being the hometown of basketball legend Larry Bird. Again, India.
Okay.
Not India, Indiana.
Larry Bird's not from India.
I keep saying India like it's like listen,
I still got Charbet on the mind.
We're transcending continents right now, everyone. Okay, but listen, Indiana, and before Bird, there was Chef Louis Perrin, allegedly faced with a citrus crisis. No more oranges available to juice.
Oh, no.
At the French Lick Springs Hotel, he grabbed some tomatoes and juiced them. His guests were intrigued, maybe even delighted, and probably a bit baffled. And here's where the myth grows. The city starts making this stuff in bulk. French Lick becomes, for a fleeting moment, the global capital of tomato juice, which you can see on the next slide. And by 1928, though, okay, the industrial food machine kicks in, big canneries take over production, and French Lick fades back into a culinary obscurity. Now, Perrin wasn't reinventing the wheel. Long before his tomato tinkering, Americans had been juicing tomatoes already, particularly before the Civil War, John. Pre-war recipes abound for tomato tonics, condiments, and even protein like proto smoothies. Okay, that's right. Tomato drinks were part of a broader culinary tradition, especially in a world where refrigeration was rare and preserving produce was really a seasonal art. Okay, so let's pause on the year. It's 1917. Not just the birth of tomato juice, but the moment America enters the First World War. And war, of course, forces a nation to think about how hard nutrition is.
Yep.
British pre-enlistment medicals had already shown just how poorly fed the working class were. The U.S., determined to do better, began to think of food scientifically. Enter the calorie and the vitamin, two of the early 20th century's most transformative discoveries. Suddenly, food isn't just about the flavor or fullness. It's data, numbers, grams, units of energy. President Woodrow Wilson establishes a national food authority. And amidst all this, the humble tomato becomes something of a star, John. Easy to grow.
Star is born.
Right? Nutrient dense, and crucially, cannibal. Heck, when you think about a garden, some of the first things you'll grow is a tomato plant.
It's true. I grow them. Yep.
They're very easy. So yet, the technology of canning had matured. No more preserving tomatoes with sugar. Now you could see their freshness in a tin and ship them across the country or even overseas. Another pivotal force behind tomato juice's accent was prohibition.
It's back again.
So deprived of wine, beer, and cocktails, Americans turned mocktails and non-alcoholic innovations. Tomato juice, bold in flavor, color, filled the void. Okay, everyone? So think about it like that. There's so much that tomato juice brings up on. You know what I mean? There's so much that happens that in tomatoes that we're going to talk about even more. And it had helped. Freezing technology gave it an edge over orange juice. So, which didn't really ship or freeze well at all. Plus, the juice had fewer calories, making it a darling of the diet conscious in the 1920s and the 1930s. Okay, John. So there's so much that I always say, like, think about what was happening during those times. Soon enough, the titans of food got involved. Heinz, Campbell's, and even Welch's, best known for grapes, jumped into tomato juice in 1927. How cool is that? Seriously.
Yeah. Welch's, it's all these common people and times keep popping up. Prohibition, Welch's, they're all there.
It's pretty cool though, huh?
Yeah.
This is why I grabbed this story.
Yeah. Juice is really coming to the world in this early 20th century period.
But keep in mind, we're still only in 1917. By the time Prohibition ends in 1933, juice is so entrenched in American kitchens that 8 million cans are sold in 1935. And that same year, a bartender combines vodka, tomato juice, a few spices. Voila, right? The Bloody Mary.
The good old Bloody Mary, yep.
Now,
I don't like Bloody Mary, though.
Neither do I. Don't drink that. Cold. Yeah. Now, when commercial aviation takes off in the 1920s, tomato juice climbs aboard. The first in-flight meals arrive in 1927. Okay? And what do you think happens?
I don't know. Something with tomatoes.
The earliest aviation celebrities, Amelia Earhart.
Of course, yeah.
Right? The flying icon of her age. Earhart appeared on a Heinz magazine of the air, where she proclaimed tomato juice her favorite working beverage and food too.
Of course she did.
She drank it hot or cold through a straw, often opened an ice pick mid-flight. How cool is that? So, all right. Again, love the story. Her love for the juice was so well known that it really became part of her aerial image. All reliable tomato juice, she called it. And just like that, the association between aviation and tomato juice took root. Now let's talk about science. You may have heard this legend, John, or myth about tomato juice in planes. Yeah. So why do so many people crave tomato juice only on airplanes, John?
That is the question, because I have heard this myth. I have definitely heard it. I still don't understand it, but
they always have tomato juice on flights too.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen it. I mean, I don't see like everybody doing it, but I definitely do see some people do it.
Yeah, I do. So I say we tell. So it turns out, Lufkin in Asia wanted to know the answer to this question too. And in 2010, they commissioned a study to explore why passengers drank more tomato juice than beer by volume. And researchers found that airplane cabin noise and pressure dulled the senses of sweetness and saltiness by about 30%. But there was a twist. The flavor, savory, meaty, was enhanced in flight. It really was. And what's full of umami? Tomato juice. So it wasn't just Earhart's influence or airline tradition. The drink actually tastes better up there. So Cornell, one of our delighted, educated sponsors of our show as well, taste physiologist Robin Dando confirmed it in 2015. Loud noise, down goes sugar, up goes umami. Tomato juice becomes the Goldilocks of high altitude beverages. Despite its high flying reputation, tomato juice fell out of fashion in the 1980s. Blame the salt, right? Studies began warning about sodium intake and tomato juice, and it really, with its briny boldness, got sidelined, John. And yet, it's a place in the aviation lore remains, though, because in 1965, Ohio, home of the Wright brothers, declared tomato juice its official beverage, a fitting tribute for a drink that rose with the planes and never quite landed.
Yeah. So I wonder if tomato juice then would be taste even better in space.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a question.
We need an astronaut on the line. We need, if there's any astronauts out there that want to be in the history of Fresh Pros, if either Fresh than an astronaut.
Watch it be like the most delicious thing possible.
Oh my God, listen, tomato juice gives me heartburn.
Yeah, it does actually, yeah.
That's why I don't drink. Listen, that's why I don't drink Bloody Marys.
Yeah,
because that gives me heartburn. I've even seen Bloody Marys with like shrimp in it and like bacon. Like people do Bloody Marys are no joke to some people.
No, it's true. It's true. Well,
all right. What's your number one on the list?
My number one. So this is not again something I personally drink.
That is.
I don't drink that, but I like the story.
I don't eat carrots, and I
only
love
eat carrots.
Dude, I only eat carrots if they're fried, baked, like mushy.
Really? You don't like them? You don't like them raw?
Me, Bugs Bunny would make me mad every once in a while. I'd be like, bro,
it's so good. But you haven't had the right carrot yet, I think.
Maybe it's texture for me, I think.
Maybe. But I like carrots. I do not like carrot juice, but the story's great.
Well, so tell me.
Here comes the story, okay? So the year is 1940. The Luftwaffe is bombing British cities night after night. And we know that in our history lessons as the Blitz. And the Londoners are living through these blackouts. And the fear of being caught in an air raid is just ever present. But up in the skies, the Royal Air Force is mounting a remarkably effective defense, Patrick, one that baffles both the public and, it seems, the enemy. And that success was thanks in large part to a new piece of secret technology. No, it's not carrots. It's airborne interception radar, or AI radar. Okay, yes, I know we're talking about radar on the history of fresh produce, but there is a connection. So this technology was first used by the RAF in 1940, and it allowed the British pilots to detect enemy bombers before they even crossed the channel. But radar, of course, was highly classified, so the government needed a cover story. And that's where the Ministry of Information enters the story. And every time I hear like the Ministry of anything, I think of Harry Potter. So I guess
100%.
The Ministry of Secrets.
The Ministry, I'm like a magic.
Yeah, Ministry of Secrets, magic, whatever it is. But this is the Ministry of Information. So I like to imagine some wizard kind of running this. But the ministry decided, maybe based on this story, the Ministry of Information decided to explain the RAF's night fighting prowess not with science, but with carrots. Now, before we get deeper into that, one man in particular became central to this myth that they're painting, and that is squadron leader John Cunningham, which you can see if you're watching live. Now, he was nicknamed a very intimidating nickname, Patrick, of Cat's Eyes. And he became a national hero. He was the first British pilot to shoot down an enemy plane using this AI radar. But according to the newspapers, his secret wasn't technology, because remember, this is classified. So what they said this was thanks to was carrots. The government insisted that his superhuman night vision came from eating copious quantities of carrots. And it was a pretty brilliant misdirection. There were even public health posters promoting carrots for vision, which you can see here.
That's cool.
I would love to see, instead of this guy holding a rifle, if he was holding a carrot or something. But yeah, whatever. What do I know?
I'm trying to get it bigger on the screen.
I'm not in propaganda, so. But they had also other messages like carrots keep you healthy and help you see in the blackout. So the idea wasn't completely absurd, though. Okay, because carrots do. I mean, I think most of us know this. I mean,
maybe this is why my reading is so bad. Maybe I need to start eating carrots.
Yeah, see, because they do contain beta carotene, which the body converts to vitamin A, which is important for eye health, but not superhuman night vision. Okay, let's just put that on the record right now.
I was like,
you're not gonna see like a cat, if you will. But now the question is, did the Nazis fall for this story? Now that's a thing that's still debated. Okay, there's no hard evidence that they bought into the carrot ruse, but there are tantalizing suggestions. Okay, so apocryphal tales say the Germans began feeding their pilots more carrots, believing there might be some truth to it.
Okay.
Though some historians say the real goal was never to fool the Nazis, again, who after all had their own radar capabilities. Instead, the carrot story was aimed to squarely at the British public, to maintain morale, to promote self-sufficiency, and perhaps even to solve another looming problem, which was what to do with too many carrots. But why do they have too many carrots? Why is that a problem? So by 1942, Britain had a new problem. Okay. And that's again, too many carrots. So they had this campaign called the Dig for Victory, and it had really taken off. And victory gardens were just everywhere. And rationing had made bacon, butter, and sugar scarce. But carrots again were everywhere because everyone had these gardens. You're not going to grow bacon in your garden or butter, right? You're growing veggies and fruits, mostly veggies.
True.
So Lord Woolton, the Minister of Food, saw this as an opportunity. He pushed carrots as a patriotic superfood. And he said, quote, to hear him talk, they contain enough vitamin A to make moles see in a coal mine. So again, there's that messaging that you can
Moles
see
in a coal mine.
that you can see magically in the dark if you eat enough carrots. Now, Woolton's messaging was relentless. Okay, the Ministry of Food produced leaflets, newspaper ads, and even propaganda films. One that even ended with the memorable line, "quote Isn't an hour in the garden better than an hour in the queue?" End quote. I would say yes. I would rather spend an hour in the garden than in the queue.
Yeah, agreed.
I'd take that. And so here's where it gets wonderfully surreal, Patrick. And this is probably one of my favorite parts of the story. So the ministry introduces cartoon mascots, Dr. Carrot and Potato Pete. We're not going to talk about Potato Pete today, but you got Dr. Carrot here.
I like Dr. Carrot.
I love Dr. Carrot. So if you can
look
see
at Dr. Carrot, look at him.
Now,
looking like a doc.
We really need more, fruit and veggie propaganda in our lives today. I'm just saying. But so Dr. Carrot, if you can't see him, so he's wearing spectacles. He has a top hat. He's carrying a briefcase stuffed with vitamin A. He's a great character, and he becomes this friendly face of wartime nutrition. And Patrick, it gets even better because Disney, Walt Disney gets involved. And so you have the famed cartoonist Hank Porter, who creates a whole carrot family for British use. You have Carroty George, Clara Carrot, and Pop Carrot. You have a veritable vegetable sitcom right there ready to launch. But there's a sad part of that, Patrick, because I've never heard about this until now. And there's a reason for that, because although this sounds amazing, the British government ultimately decided not to distribute the Disney materials widely.
Oh, man.
And I know, that must be one of the...
Hey, why would they do that?
Yeah, I mean, that must be one of the only examples in history where Disney was rejected for their
Listen, I have said, because you keep talking about propaganda. It's funny that you bring this up. So a buddy of mine sent me these years ago, and I'm actually looking at them now. And this is probably by far the best propaganda I have for.
Better be produce propaganda.
For no, it's 100%. So we have. Here we go.
Oh, Carlo
the carrot. Okay. And if you look on the bottom, that says Dan's Fresh Produce. Okay. So this was Dan Avakian.
That's pretty funny.
He's
a little creepier. He's a little creepier than Dr. Carrot, I will say.
Okay, 100%. And then we got
Percy.
We got Percy the pomegranate. Now, what's crazy is
his mind is literally blown.
Is they got the stats on the back.
Oh, okay. Clever.
Growing region, scientific name, nutrients, Dan's store in Alameda. Oh, here we go. Who doesn't love a good Zachary the zucchini? Okay.
Oh gosh.
So I will try to show more of those three as we go.
Future giveaways right there.
Keep going, John.
But why did the British government reject Disney for this amazing lineup of carrot characters? Well, they felt that Dr. Carrot was already famous enough in the UK, and that's something you just couldn't make up. Okay, Dr. Carrot was the boss, and you weren't going to get rid of him. Now, all this carrot enthusiasm eventually led to a curious culinary development, and that is where we're finally getting to the juice side of it. And that's carolade, not lemonade, carolade. And carolade is a juice made from grated carrots and rutabagas. That's a vegetable you don't hear much about, rutabagas. And they were strained through muslin. And so you have this homemade vitamin-packed drink to beat wartime shortages. And the Ministry of Food promoted it along with other carrot concoctions like carrot jam, curried carrots, and I don't think I'd ever try this, but carrot fudge. And what's interesting here is that despite the public messaging around carolade and other bizarre carrot concoctions, internal documents show the ministry wasn't at all enthusiastic about carrot juice. And one official report even said, quote, carrot juice is of relatively low vitamin value, and when concentrated to a syrup has no greater value than that of the sugar it contains, end quote. That said, Patrick, the idea of carolade persisted, not because it was scientifically sound, but because it represented something more. It represented resourcefulness, creativity, and the wartime spirit of obviously making do. So in the end, the carrot story is more than just a quirky footnote in wartime history. It's a tale, as we've been seeing, of deep propaganda done well, a clever blend of half-truths and public health, of national morale, and, of course, orange vegetables. And so the carrot may not have won the war on its own, but it certainly helped the British public feel like they were being a willing participant in the fight.
It may not have won the war.
And we'll always remember Carroty George and Clara Carrot.
Dr. Carrot. We'll listen, because you know who was waiting at home for you, old Hannah the Honeydew.
Oh, jeez. Some of those.
Let's not forget old CJ.
CJ looks friendly.
Let me tell you, it should have been Patrick the pineapple, but they made Patricia. But look at Patricia.
Oh man, I think she's been having too much of the cider.
Patricia's been in Hawaii for way too long.
Way too long. Yeah,
she's sun dried and she's got some Maui Wowie in her system. It looks like. So I'm just gonna say.
Now it's time for your number one. What's your
number one's pretty cool. And I
wonder what it could be.
Listen, if you could guess, I say if you can guess, you already know, right? Like I always stick to oranges, okay? And orange juice. So we began in the orange groves of Florida sometime around the late 1920s. Now, at that point, orange juice wasn't the household staple it is today. It was fresh squeezed, seasonal, a bit of a luxury, really. People would eat oranges fresh or squeeze them at home. But as farming industrialized and citrus groves multiplied, Florida and California found themselves producing far more oranges than the market could bear. And so citrus growers began discussing a radical idea. Rather than cut production, why not juice the excess? The problem was that the technology just wasn't there yet. Canned orange juice was there. Well, let's be kind of call it acquired taste, because that's all I'm gonna say. On the other hand, John, and I haven't tried it, but I know anything like that out of a can and orange juice is not going to go over really well. Okay, so let's put it bluntly, it was foul. In 1930, Americans consumed about 19 pounds of fresh oranges per person, but only a teaspoon of canned orange juice per year. The taste was flat, okay? The color was odd, and it had lost the brightness people loved in fresh juice.
Sounds wonderful. Then
entered the marketers. The 1920s and 30s were a golden age for pseudoscience and advertising. Around the same time, the discovery of vitamins was making headlines. And we heard when I was talking about that in tomato juice. Vitamin C, of course, became the poster child, and oranges packed with the stuff were suddenly given a medical authority. But the real marketing gold came courtesy of Elmer McCollum, a nutritionist with a flair for drama. McCollum claimed that certain foods, right, things like bread and milk, produce acid in the body, leading to a mysterious alignment he called acidosis. And what was the cure for that, John?
I can only wonder.
You guessed it. Orange juice. Oranges in any form, preferably as many as you could get your hands on. Sunkist jumped on that bandwagon, right?
Of course they did.
Running ads like Estelle's steam to lack vitality, didn't even make an effort to be entertaining. Hence, she did not attract the men. Acidosis is the word of almost every modern physician's tongue.
Poor
okay.
Estelle.
So And the cure naturally was to consume oranges, okay, at every opportunity. They even claimed that you couldn't overdose on oranges. It was ludicrous, okay? And of course, but sales soared. By the time World War II broke out, there was still the same problem. Too many oranges and not enough people buying them. The US military had its own concern, making sure its troops were well fed with vitamin C. The solution was citrus, but the troops hated the foul tasting orange juice. So the U.S. Army put out a call, invent a version of orange juice that tastes good, ships well, and lasts. The breakthrough came in 1945 when a group of USDA scientists in Florida developed a new technique. They evaporated the juice under vacuum and heated, concentrated it into thick, sugary liquid. Then, crucially, they added back a bit of fresh juice to restore some of the lost flavor. The result, frozen concentrated orange juice, as you know today, is FCOJ. And among the first to pounce on the new tech was a man named Richard Stetson Morse. He had already powdered penicillin and helped invent instant coffee. Now he threw himself into orange juice. The Army asked Morse to produce 500,000 palatable orange juice concentrate, so he set out the Florida Foods Corporation in 1945. Unfortunately, the war ended before the juice shipped, but he pushed on. In 1946, the company became Vacuum Foods and began selling concentrated orange juice to the American public. And it was the right product at the right time. The post-war boom meant more Americans were buying electric fridges. And let me back up just a quick second. So, John, we have growers that we deal with that are in Florida and California citrus. And what made me pick this story too, everyone, is that I was actually in an orange grove just no more than a few weeks ago with a grower that is a third generation. Their company was started in the late 1800s and officially started in around 1904. So as 5 generations of family are here on the earth, right? Not anymore, but there's now into the 5th generation. It was funny because the 3rd generation, we were talking about this exact story the other day.
Oh, yeah.
And he was saying, and it's so funny, he said, because World War II, and this was a very relevant story, did create the boom.
Oh, yeah.
But what it did is because of the troops needing all of that over there to, 1, for vitamin C, 2, they needed something, right? An alternative, a healthy alternative. So the scientists came up with these things. USDA got it going, right? All of this happens. But then what that did was it enabled growers to start growing for juice. They saw that there was a market that they could concentrate this, and it turned into a globally traded commodity now, right? Which is juice. And that could be why the fall of Florida has happened over the years, is because they've switched their crops to a different market that is now gone. And then obviously the bug came in and it just turned into a different market with imports and everything else. So it was very relevant, why I also picked this story. And as we think about now, the electric fridge, right? Frozen foods were all the rage. And orange juice, right, thanks to Morse and the USDA, was suddenly the frozen Cinderella story, John. Okay? Right? Citrus growers rejoiced because now they still know they've got an alternative for their fruit. The technology allowed them to ramp up production even more. The industry planted more trees, produced more juice, and flooded the market with frozen concentrate. And to make the product even more appealing, companies began adding flavor packs, custom blends of oils, essence, and vitamin C to give each brand its unique profile. By the 1950s, FCOJ dominated the market. That's what my dad does. He sold frozen concentrated orange juice. And out there, you might be thinking to yourself, I know what that is. Well, think about it like this. Have you ever seen the movie Trading Places? Okay.
No,
it was all about the frozen it was with Dan Aykroyd and Eddie Murphy.
Oh, that's right.
And they traded places. And Eddie Murphy was the bum who traded places with a frozen concentrated orange juice stockbroker.
That's the job to have back then.
They were fixing the market. That's why Eddie Murphy was being set up, because they were fixing the orange juice market globally.
It's a big business.
Big business, everyone. So think about that. I mean, orange juice literally went, had gone from the perishable fruit to shelf stable. It was easy, convenient, and deeply embedded into the American psyche as a symbol of health and morning vitality. So
100%,
Fast forward to the early 1980s and a new buzzword hit the juice aisle. Not from concentrate, or as you know it, is NFC. Okay. It sounded healthier, pure, more authentic. But John, it was anything but simple. NFC was made using flash pasteurization, deoxygenation, de-oiling by centrifuge, and long-term storage in stainless steel tanks, sometimes up to a year. When the juice is finally ready, it was tasteless.
I was gonna say, that sounds amazing.
No. And so, yes, once again,
nope. Looks like we lost Patrick here temporarily. So I'm going to pick off while he tries to make his way back through. I'm going to see if I can pull up his notes here. So what is he talking about? So yeah, flavor or tasteless orange juice. So I think we have Patrick back here. Hold on, let's see. This is the beauty of live. Oh, there we go. It's the beauty of live.
Hey, what can happens. I say? You know, honestly, I think we just jumped out. I just saw this comment. I mean, look at that. Listen, carrot juice, please. This guy's got a point. John, where the last I left off was talking about the orange juice.
Orange juice, yeah.
Yeah, right. So, and you know, think about it. Once again, it had to be saved with flavor packs and technology development. So, the frozen concentrate era was used to give the NFC its natural taste. Okay. Still, the branding worked. Orange juice was now a symbol of morning wellness. And though the myth of acidosis was long buried, the idea that vitamin C could kickstart your midday remained. So where are we at? Where are we now, John?
Where are we?
Orange juice is still a breakfast staple. Though its dominance is no longer assured, many consumers now seek out fresh, cold pressed, or unpasteurized juice. There's a growing awareness of the pulp, right? Once removed for being inconvenient, is actually the most nutritious part. But the fact remains, this global phenomenon was born, legitimately of an ancient tradition, but the 20th century marketing, warm time necessities, and the need to dump a lot of extra fruit. In fact, according to a 2003 USDA report, only 5% of Americans eat a fresh orange on any given day, but 21% drink orange juice.
Crazy. Well, I still drink orange juice, not as much as I do now that you ruined it for me. With
I know I have a citrus, it's Casa Citrus America juicer, and I get oranges, so I'm juicing. Like I have 40 pounds of oranges I have to juice to bring to our equestrian competition this weekend.
Listen, don't rub it in, okay?
And it's good Florida Valencias. All right, everyone.
That was our top 3 each, top 6 produce beverages, produce-based drinks. There we go. Some more here, Jackfruit Jake. They changed the order on that one. But just take a picture and post them up somewhere. That's what you got to do. Make a calendar. But yeah, I think we could all see that there was
old Eddie the eggplant.
Eddie the eggplant. But yeah, interesting. Look, a lot of these beverages really came to life during the World War and Prohibition. That was what triggered a lot of these.
Asparagus Owl looks like a tennis player.
He does. Yeah.
That's the band, though.
He definitely does.
All right, let's get this. Let's wrap this up, man.
Yes. So, so I guess that's it. We'll have another episode coming out. Well, if you didn't watch this live, it'll be on replay via the podcast channel next week. And then after that, fresh new episodes as always every week. And we will let you all know when the next live stream will be very soon. As always, do register or subscribe to our bi-weekly newsletter. Lots of cool content there as well, because we obviously can't talk about everything in a single episode. So you get bonus material in there as well that you can read through at your own leisure. Interesting, fascinating stories, mini stories that we can't fit into our episodes. And of course, if you want to get even more, because you just can't get enough fresh produce history, or you just can't get enough of me and Patrick, whatever it is, you can join the History of Fresh Produce Club. And you can learn more about that by visiting the Produce Industry Podcast website or clicking the link in the show notes in the podcast episodes. And I think that's all we have for today. So,
yes, sir.
We look forward to seeing you all soon. And as always, thanks for all the support. And until then, it's goodbye for me, John Papp.
And goodbye for me, Patrick Kelly.